Nick Kershaw, and wouldn't it be good? It's 9:14 on a Thursday morning, and we're going live on Facebook. We have a very special guest with us this morning, a consultant from the Department of Geriatric Medicine at Tan Tock Seng Hospital. Our guest is Dr. Chia. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to talk about frailty and sarcopenia and the fact that they are reversible. What interests me here is, first of all, let's describe frailty as opposed to, I'm just getting old.
Okay.
What's the difference?
Right. So when we talk about frailty, we think about it as a health state, right? It's a state of health that a person has. And this usually is not so good because the older adult who has frailty essentially has decreased physiological reserves.
Okay.
Right. And when this happens, you have more difficulty when you are sick, and less ability to withstand the stresses from the health, and also decreased ability to recover post the health event, right? A lot of times I describe it to my patients or their families as if you think of yourself standing on a step or stairs, right, and you're right at the top here. If you are not frail, what happens is when you get sick, you kind of like drop a little bit.
Yes.
And then when you recover, you kind of like, go back up.
Yeah.
Okay. But for an older adult who's frail, what happens is when they drop, firstly, they drop worse.
Okay.
And then sometimes as they recover, it's more difficult and they may not go back up to right at the top.
So they're continuously decreasing.
Yeah, so they may come up a little bit, but they might not go back to the baseline.
Yeah.
And then what happens as they get multiple health events is that they go into this spiral, right? And then your function and your general health kind of just goes downhill from there.
And this frailty is, so it's not only, it's not just about physical frailty.
Yes.
It would affect your organs. It would affect.
I would say that from a very general standpoint, the most common thing we see is the physical frailty, right?
Okay.
Because some of them might have already chronic diseases and other conditions, and it presents most obviously as the physical frailty.
Right. Okay.
And then what about sarcopenia? Some of us are not very familiar with the term. So perhaps you could explain what it is and why it matters to us.
So sarcopenia is a condition regarding our muscles, right? And what happens in sarcopenia is that there is an accelerated loss of your muscle mass, the strength of the muscle, as well as the way your muscle functions. And that's what sarcopenia is, yeah.
So frailty and sarcopenia, do they go together? Do you usually find them together?
Technically, they can happen independently.
Okay.
However, more often than not, they come together. We see them in the same older adult, mainly because when we talk about the physical part of frailty, that's obvious. We know that sarcopenia is one of the major contributors to the development of physical frailty. And therefore, if you have sarcopenia, you're more likely to become physically frail as well.
Okay. I tell you what, we'll go back. We'll go onto Facebook now. If you have any questions, plonk them in the comment section of our Facebook page, and we'll try and get the doctor to answer them. If you have any questions about frailty and sarcopenia, we'll want to talk about the conditions how these conditions actually affect older people. And I want to bring up something that I saw on a bus the other day, and I want to know whether that affects sarcopenia or not. Let's go to Facebook. All right, we're on Facebook Live. So before we get into how this condition affects older people, I was on a bus the other day and I saw this kid, 9 years old maybe, no muscle definition whatsoever. It was like the child was walking on two toothpicks and the arms were just two other toothpicks. In a younger age, when a child is like that, does that affect them later in life with sarcopenia?
I think there is a possibility. As of current understanding of sarcopenia, a lot of what has been studied is in the older adult, right? So we know a lot about, what causes sarcopenia in the older adult, what are the things we need to address for the older adult. But of course, with regards to the muscle health, we think about it over lifespan, right? And there are thoughts that, whatever you do in the earlier life does have impact on what happens in the later life as well, with a lot of conditions, right? And definitely maybe possibly from sarcopenia. So a lot of research is being done to look at, how you eat in your earlier life, the kind of activity that you do, how does that translate later on to your muscle health. Yeah. So there may be some associations in that case, but that's still something that we're trying to discover.
Yeah, because I remember when I was growing up, my parents were always, you've got to be active, you've got to move, you can't sit still, because then later when you're older, you get those sort of stories. So there is a possibility that all that is true.
Yes. So I mean, a lot of times we say, listen to your parents, right? Essentially, the idea is that for most of us, in terms of our muscle, we tend to gain and peak in the middle age, right? So you build whatever reserves you have, and then from the middle age onwards, naturally, as we grow a little bit older, we tend to start losing the muscle. Even when you don't do anything, you tend to lose, and that is with the amount of muscle you have as well as the strength of your muscle. And the older you get, the faster the rate of loss is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, he was like describing me when I was a kid. I was like super skinny, toothpicks for arms and toothpicks for legs, and I didn't want to eat. And my parents had to bring me to the doctor to eat this very thick and sticky liquid, just to get me to eat, have an appetite for food. Yeah. So there's a high chance that I may suffer from frailty and sarcopenia. We'll see. We'll check back with you 20 years from now.
There you go. 20 years from now, we'll be looking for Dr. Chia. Okay, let's go back to the older adults. So how do the conditions of frailty and sarcopenia affect an older person's daily lives? I mean, it must be physical, mental, there's got all kinds of things, right?
So I think the most obvious ways that someone might feel when they have sarcopenia would be related to impacts on their day-to-day activities. If you do have sarcopenia, you are physically frail, you might have difficulties, for example, even getting up from a chair by yourself, problems with climbing stairs. Some people might find that, gradually I can't carry things as I walk anymore. And as you can imagine, this would have impacts on how you do things day to day. You might be walking slower, might feel more tired easily. And in these cases, then when they have these symptoms, they may limit what they do outside as well, right? I can't go out as much or go out as far. And they tend to then lose some element of socialization. And of course, then other than the physical impacts that, the conditions have on the individual, then as you lose socialization, lack community exploration, that has impacts on your mental as well as your overall quality of life.
Interesting. You were saying you can't carry things for long periods anymore. Are we talking about when we can't carry? Are we talking about discomfort in the muscle, discomfort in the joints, or is it both?
From a sarcopenia standpoint, it is more feeling like your muscles are tired, more than the joint pains.
Okay.
So what are some other warning signs or symptoms, we should look out for, whether it's our family members or even in ourselves, when it comes to frailty or sarcopenia?
So the common warning signs that the older adult may often experience, as I mentioned, might be weakness, right? And that weakness shows up most prominently or most commonly in, when they try to change positions, getting up from a chair, getting up from the bed. When they're going to go up the staircases, they find that they might need more support. They find that they're walking a lot slower, like maybe I could walk a lot faster to the market previously, and then slowly my speed is just gradually decreasing. Some people might find they have unintentional weight loss or even feel like tired just doing the usual activities that they didn't feel tired doing.
These conditions, they seem inevitable with age. Someone listening to us now, say, who's midlife, 40s, let's say, what can they do to help reduce the chances of developing these conditions?
I mean, definitely there's a lot that can be done. And in fact, if you do what is required, the chances of actually turning sarcopenia or developing physical frailty is going to decrease, right? And this is what the studies have shown. Technically, what we think about as we go older, a lot of times my older adult tells me, I'm already so elderly, right? Why do I need to do so many things? I should just be sitting around and I don't have to. But actually that that is the reasons why they start developing some of these things like sarcopenia and physical frailty. And in fact, as we grow older, we at least have to do some form of maintenance, if not more, because we do lose faster. And in order to match up the loss, we at least have to do a little bit, right? And what helps a lot of times when we talk about sarcopenia and physical frailty, the key focuses are a combination of physical activity, exercise essentially, right, and nutritional balances.
Okay.
But of course, if you also have chronic conditions, diabetes, heart problems, kidney problems, then having good control of these medical issues are going to be also important together with the exercise and the nutrition.
Okay, then the question then arises, if we're talking about physical activity, walking or swimming?
To answer that question first is a lot of times what exercise you choose to do really depends on what your body is able to tolerate. Most of it, if you can do something, is better than doing nothing at all. That's usually the principle, right? You should be doing something. Something is better than nothing. Secondly is then walking and swimming are sort of aerobic exercises, right? So if you do have joint pains, arthritis, and which a lot of our older adults do have, and they can't walk that much, then swimming is a good aerobic exercise because you offload the weight. However, if we're talking about muscle health, then what is needed beyond your aerobic exercise is resistance exercises. And the resistance exercises are the ones that primarily help with building the muscle mass and the muscle strength.
Which means light gym workouts and things like that would be a good idea.
Yeah, so I think basically what a resistance exercise is exercise that pushes your body against a force, right? A lot of times my older adults get a little bit turned away when we talk about resistance exercises, because when we talk about it, they imagine like, oh, I have to go to the gym and I have to lift big weights, right? But in fact, there are many ways we can perform resistance exercises. These can be body weight. You don't even have to use any other weights.
Okay, let's hold that idea. We'll go back on radio and figure out what we're going to talk. Okay, so let me go back and ask the question again. So we were talking about walking and swimming.
Yes.
Walking and swimming being great aerobic exercises, but you say we also need to do resistance exercises.
Yes.
For the elderly, can you explain what resistance exercises mean?
So as I was mentioning, the resistance exercise is you have to do some form of exercise that has a opposing force, right? At very basic types of resistance exercise that we often teach our older adults are body weight based, right? You don't need to use extra weights because just by using your own body weight, that oftentimes provide enough resistance. These could be things like sit to stand exercises, right? Because that trains your lower legs. They could be toe lifts, and that trains the lower leg muscles as well. And these are simple ways. Sometimes they can also do exercise resistant bands. And that's not as strenuous as having to lift weights.
Okay, and now to the hopeful part of our topic. Is it really possible to prevent or even reverse frailty and sarcopenia? What kinds of interventions work best?
Definitely there is. So when we talk about managing sarcopenia and frailty, we think about it from a multimodal approach, right? It's not just one thing. A lot of times people ask me, do you just have a pill, right, that I can take to improve some of these things? But a lot of it is lifestyle changes. And these, like I mentioned earlier, is key focus on exercise and nutrition. Exercise-wise, we're talking about resistance exercises to help build muscle mass and muscle strength. But we also advise incorporating a little bit of flexibility exercises, right? Balance exercises, because that helps with decreasing the falls risk. Because as you get sarcopenic and physically frail, you can also have increased risk of falls. And it helps with functional mobility.
Okay.
So you mentioned diet, food-wise. What should we eat?
Food-wise, the key focuses are mainly enough calories, protein, as the two combinations, because as you can think about, your protein are the building blocks of your muscle. So enough protein to maintain the muscle and enough calories to maintain the weight are the key nutritional sort of focuses in management of these conditions.
For those of you who are worried about themselves or about a loved one, what's the first step they should take, and how do they find a professional to help them?
Right. So I think from a first step standpoint is if you do find, oftentimes we'll advise, if you do find that you have some of these warning symptoms that we're talking about, it's always good to first seek a review with your usual physician. It's mainly to make sure that, these symptoms are not related to other medical conditions, right? Because then these need to be treated. And also then they can provide you with advice about what might be appropriate in terms of the lifestyle change that you want to embark on, because they do know what other conditions you do have, right?
Okay.
The general idea is, from a lifestyle improvement standpoint, is to increase the physical activity and then attain some form of balanced nutrition. Yeah.
Normally, when someone sees a specialist about sarcopenia, how long are they under treatment?
I would say it really depends on how much our patients improve. So a lot of them come to us primarily for falls, because they find that I'm falling down more. And I feel like, as I walk, I'm slower, I'm weaker. We monitor them with the guidance of the physiotherapist for the exercises, sometimes with the dietitian for nutritional advice. And then we see, because a lot of times what we want to look at other than, the falling, right? You don't fall so much. That's one key factor. You start walking faster because we do measure some of these things. And once they improve, then actually we may not need to see them because they can then continue that in their day-to-day lives.
In their day-to-day lives. Dr. Chia, thank you so much for joining us this morning, talking about frailty and sarcopenia. Remember, guys, it is seeing your family physician if you are not feeling well, and they will put you in touch with the right people if you need it. Again, Dr. Chia, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Morning Drive, 1FM, good times, greatest hits.
It's Thursday, the 19th.